Hey everyone, welcome to another Protect Your Child live stream. This week we are talking about everything to do with violence in 2021. And this time we're going to have a little bit more of a podcast style broadcast where Scott and I will be going back and forth a little bit. But as always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below and we will answer them as we see them. As always, this or live stream is sponsored by Guardian, and we've done a lot of these types of videos where we bring on someone who is very knowledgeable in a subject and they discuss topics related to raising children in this online world. You can find the other streams we've done on our YouTube channel or on our website, mmguardian.com. So with that all said, I think we are going to jump into our first subject. Unless Scott, do you have anything you want to preface this with?
Well, I just think, first of all, Coley, I appreciate Guardian giving me the opportunity to come on again and talk about something that's very important when it comes to raising our children. You and I were talking before we went on camera that you and I do a lot of talk about internet and apps and technology. But when it comes to this topic of violence, I think it's important, even though it might not fall under our umbrella that we normally talk about. When it comes to trying to raise kids in a safe manner, this is a very important topic. So through my years of experience of being a police officer and things that I've been trained on and taught at and classes I've taught, I welcomed the opportunity when you gave me this to come and talk about this topic. So I think it's a very important one and we're going to cover some good ideas.
Yeah, great. Always happy to have you. All right. So our first subject is going to be school shootings. So obviously that's something that is unfortunately very relevant in this day and age. And with COVID, it's been dialed back a little bit, but with schools resuming again, I'm sure this is a fear that is on parents' minds and children's minds. I hear a lot of parents talking about how anxious their children are. I work on Guardian, and so I interact with parents a lot, and children are constantly talking about things like there'll be a rumor about there's going to be a school shooting today. And so it's just really widespread, this fear. And so we want to talk about that. It gives parents some action steps they can take to discuss these things with their children and signs to look for with school shooters, what to keep an eye out for, what to do if you suspect there might be some sort of issue. So Scott, you want to just give me your initial thoughts on all this?
Yeah. And before we get started, Coley, I think it's important that we talk to parents that neither one of us, you or I, are experts in the field of this area. I have had extensive training on it, and I've taken part in a lot of the drills. And that's where I think we can share some information. But whatever information you gather, that's important information. So we want to share as much as we can, but we're also not coming out here saying that we're experts in this area. We just feel this is an important topic, especially with the comments you've received from parents through your website. My constant years of being in touch with families, whether it's private consulting or in the schools, this is a topic of concern. And a lot of people have concerns about why do we do all these drills and why is it so important we talk to our kids? Well, to start off with all about this, I think it's important to have the drills because it helps us have a plan. Now, I understand that some people might get anxious when we have the drills because they're not fun. They make us think about things that maybe we don't want to. But if we're staying current with today's news, we're seeing things that happen on social media and our school systems. These kind of occurrences could happen. So what we want to do is prepare for it and plan. If we don't plan, that's when panic can ensue. That's when maybe things won't go the way they should. And the way I always relate it, I understand they cause anxiety. But what I always tell the parents is, do you remember the first time you ever did a fire drill through your school? And most parents can't. But I say, do you remember doing them? They said, yeah, we did them like every quarter. Yeah, we did them because God forbid a fire happened. We needed to get out of the school with a system. So by the time we get to high school, we know get in a single file, please don't talk, go with your class, there are the exits. That didn't happen overnight. That was because of training. That was because of learning things to improve. And we said, okay, we need to have a system in place if something ever happens. Well, unfortunately, we need that when it comes to school shootings. So districts and schools will perform drills or education about that. In my opinion, we shouldn't take it lightly. If our students hear of a rumor that there might be a drill, I encourage the students to talk to their faculty or school resource officer or parents about their concern about it. I'm sure they'll be explained that it's an important part. They are not fun. I've run them as officers. I've been the officer that's run through the school to do the drills, and I understand they cause thought, but they're an important part because without a plan, that's when things can go really wrong. I hope it never happens again. I hope we never have to talk about this a year from now. Maybe these are things that we said, remember when, but unfortunately, we have to be ready for it. So it is part of it. And I've talked to grandparents, and they tell me how appalled they are that schools have to do that. And I always look to them and say, didn't you have to hide under your desk for certain drills when you were a kid? So it's not about living in fear, but having a plan. And that could be some of our best way of protecting ourselves and getting out of a situation if we have some kind of plan in place. I think we definitely need to take the drills seriously, but I also think we need to talk to our kids about it, why it's there and why they're important.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say to a parent whose child comes home and they're scared that, like, they heard there was a rumor about a school shooting or something like that?
Okay. Well, if they hear a rumor about a school shooting, that is something the parents should be contacting the school system or the police department about immediately. If it turns out to be a rumor or whatever it is, okay, no harm, no foul. But if we hear the information, and I know it's going to sound corny, if you hear it, tell, or if you see it, say something, those are very important when it comes to safety. And I know I'm in Connecticut. That's where I'm stationed. And today alone, right here today, we have one school system that had to bring in extra police protection because of an online threat that was received this morning. Now, that's all the information I have on it because it's that current and new. That happened because either someone reported it or someone discovered something and took the proper steps. Right now, it's not about making sure someone gets arrested or in trouble. It's about protecting the kids in that school. So if we hear something, obviously, first and foremost, put our kids at ease, talk to them, explain to them if they don't even know what a school shooting is, maybe have a talk about how some people make poor choices, how some people can hurt each other. Depending on their age grade and maturity, there's conversations that can be had about that. But telling them that that's why we drill and that's why we have plans and reaching out to the school. I think parents need to take an active role if they hear something. If it turns out to be nothing, there's no harm in it. But if you're the link, you hear information and you report it and you prevent something from happening, that's powerful. And that's what I try to relay to the kids. It's not about, so many students are worried about telling on somebody or reporting someone because they're going to be a tattletale or a snitch. That's not the case. A tattletale is he's chewing with his mouth open, or mom, she's looking at me. That's tattletale. A snitch tries to get out of trouble or someone into trouble. A hero steps up. It takes courage, it takes strength, but I think we also need to embed that in our kids, that if you hear something about violence, come talk to me. We should have the conversation before it happens so our kids have a plan. Hey, if you hear someone's going to get hurt, something's going on, come talk to me first, and we'll figure out what we can do together. If we don't have the conversation, our children might not know who to talk to or what to do.
Yeah, very well put. And what are some things that parents should be on the lookout for? Because as you just said, a lot of kids are kind of have negative feelings surrounding telling their parents these things. So what should parents look out for?
Well, it's hard to look out for it because sometimes you're not going to hear, there might not be warning signs. But also talk to your kids about, hey, this is in the past. If you have a friend who says their friend has all of a sudden become depressed or that whole attitude has changed. Now, parents, it could be adolescence, it could be puberty. There's a lot of things that change how we interact with people, how we grow. But maybe do a little research on what some of the warning signs might be where a child might be depressed. At that point, just talk to your kid. Hey, be supportive, but also let us know if you see any difference. There's not a telltale warning sign that if you see this, you've got to be alarmed about a school shooting or somebody getting hurt. Sometimes it could be a totality of a whole bunch of things going on. But the thing is the communication. And I say it on so many aspects of our life as parents. Have the conversation before it's needed. Talk to them and just tell them. I always relate to, for me, it's an internal alarm that we all have something that makes us feel uncomfortable. Some of our students might get tired or angry or get a headache. For me, if I get butterflies in my stomach, I never ignore it. That's my internal alarm. And I have a support system of friends and family I can talk to. Let your children know you're their support system. And no matter what it is, let's talk about it before it's a problem, because then we can maybe address it.
Yeah, I think that's a very common thing in really all these issues is so many parents are really reactive with these things instead of being proactive. It is so important to discuss
Well,
these things with your children?
I didn't mean to cut you off, Chloe. I'm sorry. It's not a fun topic. It's not when we want to. And I'm not saying plant a seed of fear in our kids' eyes, because it could be, the conversation could be had without planting fear. It's reality that we've got to be safe. And if we communicate and talk about our concerns, that's a foundation for safety.
Mhm.
So I never want anyone, kid or adult, to walk around looking over their shoulder and being paranoid. It's not the way to live. But if we heighten our awareness, if we get involved with positive things, and we have open communication with the people we know and trust, that's a really good foundation.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on to our next topic, which we're probably going to cross our similar territory here. That is violence from bullies. And I remember when I was in school, I definitely dealt with my fair share of bullies. And my mom always told me, go tell the teachers and just let them know when someone's bothering you so that they can handle it. You see a lot of parents discussing, like, children need to learn to stand up for themselves and confront the bully. So obviously there's a lot of different ways that these situations could be handled. What are your kind of thoughts on those different paths that can be taken?
There's a ton of different ways, and every parent or family might have a different outlook on this. And it's challenging, because I know I don't want my kids to get hurt. I want to protect my children. I want them to have the skills to protect themselves. However, sometimes there's a really thin line between protecting yourself and what we call in my state assault, which means you're the attacker. So first and foremost, I think parents need to talk to their children. You have the right to be safe, and we've got to get this mindset that if you're at trouble at school, don't go. You've got to go tell an adult in that school. They're there to keep you safe. They have a lot of things going on. It's not a guarantee that the bullying is going to stop. But the first line is letting someone know, an adult that's in that school system, in that sports team, hey, I'm having a problem. The communication sometimes is the best way to go. Second, avoidance. Sometimes, a lot of times we get dragged into the same situations. And maybe if, let's say it's the younger kids and it's happening at recess or in a specific class, maybe the school can work on, okay, we're not going to put those two in the same class. Let's have a little separation kind of thing. There's a lot of different avenues to go. But it gets challenging, because we do have the right to be safe and we have the right to protect ourselves. My first challenge to any adult who's going to talk to their kids about this is review your state laws. Each state has a different law when it comes to what is the line between protecting yourself and being the aggressor. When I used to teach assault prevention, I always said you had the right to protect yourself until the threat no longer existed. Even if you kicked the person one more time or punched them because you were aggravated or mad, if the threat stopped and you carried on, there was a chance then you might have had charges brought against you and everything. So it's very difficult. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that. And I'm not saying I don't understand and appreciate that when we're in a situation, emotions and adrenaline gets going. But that's why we plan. That's why we think about it. We have some kind of game plan. I never tell any kid you don't have the right to protect yourself, because they do. But it's such a thin line. It's 2021. We know how difficult that is. That line is very thin right now on what's defense and what's aggression. So if you're going to have the conversation with your child about protecting themselves, make sure you know the laws. And if you're not sure, contact your local police or your state police. They might have handouts or guidelines or websites you can go to. A lot of our schools have youth officers or school resource officers. Great form of communication to learn about this and what's right and wrong. But if anything does happen, and let's say a child has to protect themselves from a bully or get away, I really think the parents need to know. I think our student needs to have that open door policy with our parents. Hey, listen, you've got to talk to me. Even if you think you did something wrong, to protect yourself as your parent, please come talk to me. And then hopefully we can resolve it. Now, are there parents that believe in beating up the bully is the right way to go? I'm sure there are. I can't change everyone's opinion. But I know through my experience of 31 years of being a law enforcement officer, violence never stops violence sometimes. It just keeps a cycle going. It might be a temporary Band-Aid, but it doesn't solve the problem. There's other ways of going about it, but we do have the right to protect ourselves. And I don't mean to avoid the question, Coley, but it's a difficult one to answer because each situation is different. And that's why it's so important to do some research with your local states, but also talk to your kids about what they feel comfortable with. Building up a child's confidence can help too. I know a lot of students who take martial arts that just for the confidence building of it. And that's fantastic. A lot of senseis and a lot of people who teach martial arts will tell you this is a last resort. Well, I'll teach you the skills, but the first one is communication, getting away. A lot of times our egos play a part in it. I always tell everybody, if there's a way to get away from it, get away. You have another day to figure it out or something else. We don't have to have that, I've got to defend myself. If there's a way out, get out. You can regroup, game plan, and figure out something, maybe a better, safer, and healthier way to deal with it at a later time. It doesn't always have to be instant. But again, we do have the right to be safe. I know we had the online thing going around, and it's not even students. Let's talk about that online challenge of slap a teacher. Every time teachers asked me about that over the last month, they said, what about this slap a teacher? I said, the hashtag with that should be get arrested. If you're a teacher and you get slapped, make the report, let the chips fall where they may. Now, luckily, that challenge has died down a little bit and we fizzled. I haven't heard a ton about it. But it shows how if we take the proper action, and every teacher I talked to said, listen, document what you can, but don't go become the aggressor on that. Protect yourself, get away, or make the report. And every teacher is like, that's what I plan on doing, because they want to protect their now and their future. It's challenging. Self-protection is very challenging sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely agree with what you said about martial arts. That is what helped with me, because as soon as bullies are just aware of that you do that, you instantly become less of a target, because they just want someone who they don't think is going to fight back at all. And so you hopefully won't even need to use it. But
I'm not a martial arts person, but I've worked with so many police officers who are at every form of mixed martial arts. I've talked to, I've trained with some of them. And the biggest thing I always listen to is last resort. This is not the first thing. Someone walks up to me and asks for directions, I'm not putting them in an arm bar and taking them down to the ground. It's an awareness. And that's what I think a lot of martial arts does. And when I used to teach self-defense, the biggest thing we taught was awareness. If you know there's problems going down that certain hallway or in that neighborhood, why are you going there? Why are you putting yourself into that dangerous situation? Yeah, you might have to take an extra minute to walk around something, but you know what? There's no aggravation with that. It just costs you a minute of your time. So martial arts brings that heightens awareness. Any kind of defensive things you learn, or just paying attention to your surroundings and being aware. Teaching our kids it's okay to keep your head up and look around and make sure you're aware of what's going on and know who you can go to and know who your support system is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also helps prepare you in those situations, because a lot of people, especially kids, have never been in this situation before. So they freeze up, they get instinctual, and they don't know what to do. So if you've trained and helped them develop the right mindset, they'll be able to react appropriately.
You said something perfectly there, freeze up. And that has been, unfortunately, so many victims that I've talked to who I wanted to do something, but I froze. And there was never a game plan in place. And that's one of the ways that I've learned about it from talking to so many victims of dangerous crimes. So, all right, that's a good conversation. You don't have to, it's not accusatory with your children, but hey, tomorrow in school, if you see something violent happen or someone's giving you a hard time, not go report it. Ask your child, who would you go report it to? Because that's going to also lead into who your child feels comfortable with at school. Or I might go to my math teacher because he or she has been really cool to me. Okay, that's great. Maybe reach out to that math teacher. Hey, just so you know, you've made a connection with my child. We had a conversation and he or she said that if she ever felt uncomfortable, you're the person they're going to. If you ever hear anything, contact me. Now there's a network of communication around our kids. So our child knows, my parents know about it, and that's who I'm going to. There's a simple plan that maybe can empower our kids to get involved the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah, just communication. That's always seems to be the common variable in all this advice for all these topics.
I believe in that so much. If we can prevent instead of react, and communication is the key to that.
Awesome. We've gotten a couple of comments. One saying, great topic, thanks. You're very welcome. And another one talking about Guardian. This app has caught many things for me. I had to call the non-emergency number when my son had talked about a friend that was talking about hurting himself, as well as called the school when I knew there was a kids meeting in the school bathroom, vaping and cheating on homework. And yeah, that's with all of these subjects, it is important to communicate with your child, but it is also important to monitor their activities, especially when you just don't have time to keep track of everything. Apps like Guardian will send alerts to parents if concerning activity is detected, so you can respect your child's privacy. And if you're very open about having apps like this, most of the time, children will be at least somewhat understanding, and you can work out, like communicate, create a contract, and just make them understand why you're using the app to protect them and to help them develop positive habits. And as this mother demonstrates, I hear this. I mean, I'm thankful to hear stories like this because it means lives are being saved, but it is an unfortunate reality that teen mental health these days is definitely on the decline. There are some scary trends happening. So it's really important to communicate with your child, take advantage of technology, and to keep track of your child's activities. All right, so let's move on to the next subject, which is going to be domestic violence. And this is something I think especially parents might not know what to do if, for example, they are using Guardian and their child is communicating with another child, and maybe that other child says something about their parents being overly aggressive in some way or hitting them, or maybe you have the child over your house and you notice some marks or something like that. And there's so many other signs. So what are some things parents should look out for, and how should they handle those situations?
Well, I think one of the first warning signs, and again, this is from research, and for most of my career, for my first police department, I was a youth officer. So I was in the schools dealing with these kind of cases on a regular basis. I think one of the first things is a dramatic change in a child's behavior. If you're a parent and your child's friend comes over and all of a sudden what used to be a happy, bubbly child now, I mean, an instant change where they're mellow, they're just not themselves. A lot of times, especially the younger kids, it goes towards the bowel movements, it goes towards the stomach aches. I know that sounds really elementary, but so many times, and studies even show that it affects not just the pain of an injury, but their whole system inside. So their nervousness, and a lot of it attacks the stomach, and they're getting headaches. If you're starting to see these kind of patterns, it could just be adolescence. It could just be a change in behavior for who that child is, developmental wise. But it could be some warning signs that maybe there's some things going on. If all of a sudden that child was never violent or disruptive at your house, but all of a sudden now in the backyard, they're breaking toys, or they just seem angry, above the norm. Obviously, if you see bruises or anything, that is something that I think should be reported. Now, a lot of people might not want to go that route because they feel of consequences for the person who caused the bruise. Maybe the bruises were legitimate. It could have just taken a fall or whatever the case may be. But bruises or injuries, I think, are something we really have to keep a close eye on. And there's a lot of resources. Most towns have outreach workers. They have social workers, police departments. Your school system has things in place for this. But I also think we forget sometimes. So many people are worried about getting someone in trouble. But for me, it's the child. If that child needs someone to be a voice, if that child needs help, they may not have the capability or experience to know when to reach out for help, or who or how to reach out for help. So if we see something that causes us an alarm, maybe not a call to the police to have someone arrested, but do a little research, contact your community. There's a lot of times they have outreach or youth and family services where you can call anonymously. Hey, I've got this thought. Can you walk me through what might be some steps that I can take? There's so many resources out there that we kind of maybe don't realize it. If you just Google search, I'm sure, domestic violence clinic or help, there's online, you can do your own research to see what is out there and warning signs that go along with it. It's a tough situation. It could be a one-time situation at a house that the kid is really concerned about, or it could be an ongoing problem where that child might need some help or support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know, do you think there's a connection to be drawn, similarities between a child who is maybe being bullied and doesn't want to report it, and a parent who sees something like this happening and they're kind of scared to report it? There's a little, can just be timid and a little bit scary to take action like that, and have to, because you're gonna possibly have to face some consequences yourself, like you're taking a certain amount of responsibility on by doing those things.
Well, it's going to be nervous for everybody because you're going to have to talk about it. You're going to have to share what's going on, and that, depending on who comes over to talk to you about it, can be a very traumatic thing just there, but it's an important part. A lot of it for our youngsters is learned behavior. If we, hey, don't say anything kind of thing, that could be a learned behavior. So when they see something wrong, that's their first reaction. Hey, don't say anything. It could go the opposite way, where if they see violence in their house and now they act out because they think violence is acceptable and the way to go. So there's cycles that can start on either way, both the positive, because we can turn that around, and say, hey, listen, we're going to be respectful of each other, but we're not going to get hurt. If something gets out of line, here's what we're going to do. Or it can go the opposite way, where we learn the bad behaviors and it just continues that cycle. As an outsider looking in, that's tough. As parents who want to keep our kids safe, we also want to keep their friends safe, because they become part of our family, a lot of them. So don't be afraid to do some research. I always recommend contacting police departments, but everyone says, oh, they're going to get arrested. That's not always the case. A lot of times there's ways that we can prevent, help, or have resources. Your schools, your towns are the same way. I don't have all the answers, neither does anybody watching this. So it's okay to reach out to people, get some opinions, and use what's available to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do have another comment from Gabriella. Absolutely mandated reporter. It never hurts to place a call for a welfare check. Protective services will make the call if they are to check the home or it doesn't warrant a call. These reports can be anonymous too.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's a lot of professions out there that are mandated reporters: police officers, teachers, medical staff. So that's a really great point that's brought up. If you are in that field, you also have to think about, how do I protect myself? If I am a mandated reporter and I see something, can I not report it? That might be something where you got to really talk to maybe your legal counsel at your place of work to make sure you're clear that if I see something, I have to report it. Because we wouldn't want to see anybody maybe be hesitant and then they could lose their job or get in trouble because they didn't report it. So Gabrielle, that's a very good point. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Mm-hmm. Then we have another slightly contrasting point. Notifying the police is always a bad idea. A lot of people die during welfare checks.
Well, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I have been on numerous welfare checks as an officer and nobody got hurt or died. Have there been times where some people have gotten violent to the point where we had to bring them to the hospital? Yes. But again, everyone's got their opinion that this person could be living in a city where things go a different way. I can only speak from my experience. I don't think it's always a bad idea. I think there's a lot of positive to going about that. But again, that's just my opinion and through my experience.
And like we said earlier, you don't have to necessarily go straight to the police. Nope. There are a lot of other services that can do check-ins in addition to them. So a lot of different options if the police isn't your first choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the next topic, which is dating/relationship/sexual violence. And this is a pretty heavy topic these days, especially with the Me Too movement and what that really bringing awareness to these things. So, it's good. I think any kind of communication about these subjects is good. So let's talk about, first of all, how should parents go about discussing these things with their children, in your opinion, as far as before they even enter this phase of their life? Like, what should parents do to prepare their children?
Well, I think teaching the children of what healthy relationships are, what should be expected when people get together, that it's got to be something that's mutual. It's got to be safe. It's got to be something that is desirable. Relationships are very unique and there's so many different ways to look about it. But if we instill in our kids that you have the right to be safe and you have the right to be happy and you shouldn't compromise those, there's ways to go about that. Then as they get older, talking about the safety that goes along with it. Let's just talk about the dating part of it. There's a lot of dating situations right now that go really astray because we're meeting with strangers for the first time. A lot of dating apps and sites and social media that people will meet up. Might not be the safest way, especially for our youngsters, to meet a complete stranger for the first time alone at someone's house. So there's a lot of safety things that can go into it. If it's an online dating situation and they're, I would say, over 18 at least before they started to get involved in that world. Mm-hmm. Doing it in a public area, maybe bring someone there the first night, not arm in arm with someone, but hey, can you hang out in that restaurant at a different seat? I'm going to go meeting someone. I just want to make sure it's safe. Letting someone know where you're going and who you're going with. There's a lot of times where situations go really bad right off the get-go because we're meeting strangers. Once we get into the relationships, I always reinforce that everyone has the right to be safe. So if a relationship starts off good but starts to go bad with either violence, just not being treated like an equal, not being treated fairly, there's resources to get out, there's resources to move along, but instilling in our kids, it's okay to end a relationship. It's okay to be safe, but we have to give them those skills. A lot of times people think I have to stay here because I'm in the relationship. So many times when it comes to these things, we always feel like we have to be nice. Everybody wants to be nice and everyone wants to be liked. And I get that feeling, but there's some times where it's okay not to be nice, and it's okay to protect yourself and say no and mean it and stand by that. And it should be respected. If you say no to anything, whether it's a sexual advancement or I don't want to go here, that word should be respected. And if it's not, maybe you're not being respected as a person. You have that right. You have the right to respect yourself, but also be respected by others. So if they're not respecting the word no, maybe it's just not the right relationship at that time. Working things out, there's always ways to work things out, or there's always different options. But I think telling our kids, listen, you have the right to be safe. Here's how we can go about it.
Yeah, I think it's also important to instill what you should be doing in a relationship, as far as if someone says no to you, how you should be handling it and respecting their boundaries as well.
Absolutely, great point. We always have the right to ask. We always have the right to have things that we want and like. But if someone says no, we have that responsibility to accept that answer in a mature and friendly way, instead of resorting to violence or saying, no, it's going to be my way. It's not how healthy relationships are.
Mhm. Got another comment saying, I don't let my kid meet anyone without background checks. That's how I met the guy I'm with. There are safe ways to do that. I think
Absolutely.
that's a great idea.
And no doubt, especially as adults, there are safe ways to go about it. I'm concerned about when young kids decide that they're just going to go meet strangers. I have numerous friends that have been married and are in relationships that they've met people online and they're very successful. I have a couple times been the person, hey, I'm going to go meet this person for the first time. Will you be in the bar while I meet him? Absolutely. I'll sit over there and you won't even know I'm there. But if you need me, let me know. So I agree 100%. And I'm glad they shared that. As adults, there's safety things that go along with it. When we're talking about our kids, I just don't think it's something that young kids should be involved in.
Absolutely. Now, let's say a child is in a relationship and it's not a good one, and maybe they're scared of the other person, and so they don't want to leave it, or maybe they're scared to bring it up to their parents, something like that. What do you think that the child should do in that situation?
That's a challenging situation. One, I've never been through that, so I got to kind of go by the speculation of what I've talked to and learned from the kids that I've talked to about this. And most of them, it all went the right direction when they talked to somebody, when they finally found that person to relay it to. Because to deal with that alone, that's challenging, especially if they're not sure what direction to go or how to get out of the situation. Very challenging. So constantly, maybe just updating your kid. Hey, everything okay? Things are good? Don't have to pry into their world on every step of the way, but giving them the opportunity to talk to you. Hey, I noticed yesterday you were looking to count it down. Everything good? Keeping that door open for communication. Or if you just have a gut feeling that something's wrong, let them know. Hey, remember, uncle or aunt said they talk to you anytime. Here's their number. If you ever wanted to talk to them, call them. Maybe have someone else reach out to the child. For the child to do it themselves, that's challenging. But I always tell me they have support systems around them. They would just need to get the help. It's tough to empower that if the kid's not willing to talk to you about what's going on. So that is a challenge, knowing your resources you have in your community, but also just keep talking to your kid about it's okay and trying to empower them to make that choice to talk about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this kind of comes back to the thing we keep saying, where it's good to prepare the children and just prevent all these things happening in the first place. Now, let's say the child does come to the parent after experiencing some sort of violence, whether it's sexual or otherwise. What steps then do you think the parent should take?
It all depends on the situation. If it's a minor thing, then sometimes parents might just say, hey, you're not going to have any contact with them anymore. And parents reinforce that. If someone is hurt or injured, I believe making the report on that would be important, because if it happened once, it could happen again. And maybe having a police involved or a school involved, maybe that could prevent it from happening again. That's a judgment call for families, because there's situations where if it's not a serious injury or anything like that, it should never happen. Don't get me wrong. But there's times where people could just say, we're gonna move on and we're gonna build our skills. We're gonna do everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen again. Then there's times where it needs to be reported and it needs to be investigated. Again, I'm not saying people get arrested. I'm not saying they go to jail over it, but there are resources out there to help prevent this and deal with the reaction of it. They would need to know on that. So I'm big on reporting it, because it could prevent it from happening again.
Yeah, I think that it's also, from what I've heard, it's pretty important for if these things happen, to report it. If you're going to report it pretty soon afterwards. Like the more time passes, the more difficult it becomes to take action.
Sooner is better. Sooner is better, but sometimes they might not have that confidence right off the bat. It might take the right friend to say something. It might take the right comment from mom or dad to finally open up those communications. And if it happens immediately, that's great. If it happens down the road, that's okay too. And even down the road, let's say it's long enough where nothing's going to happen criminally, that talking could now start to build up on how to make sure it doesn't happen again, get that child resources or help or assistance they might need, and build up the skills to prevent it from happening again.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that sort of things, like relationships, can cause so much trauma, and people who don't deal with them, these can have repercussions throughout their lives if it's not dealt with. So I think in addition to reporting it, I would probably also recommend just having the child see some sort of counselor, someone who's experienced in these situations, and just someone that knows how to really talk to them properly to help them process whatever emotions they're going through.
Listen, it's not just children that could use it. Us as adults, we can use help with relationships and having resources and people to talk to and professionals that know what they're doing. This is a relationships that can be at any age, and there's challenges on every step of it. And it's okay to say, I don't have all the answers, and there's room where I can grow and be better on certain things. And there's certain things I do very well. There are professionals out there or people out there you could talk to that can help us all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that counselors in general are a good idea for anyone. I think that there is a certain stigma, which means a child may be a little bit resistant to talking to them, and especially just admitting that they would want one to begin with. So that's definitely something that I think I would recommend parents just discussing with their child, seeing if they're open to it, and even if they're not, kind of pushing them maybe a little bit just to go see what it's like, because a lot of people are really reluctant to at first, but then once they experience it, they realize, oh wow, this is extremely cathartic, and I really needed this.
I think it's also important that first person might not be the right connection. And I think you have to have a connection with whoever you talk to feel comfortable, to feel trust. And some people just might not be ready to talk, and that's okay too. We all process it differently, but to give everyone, kids or adults, the opportunity and the doors where they can go down, that's where I think it's important to give the opportunity that here's what you can do, and here's what's out there for you available.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that is all the topics. So let's see. All right. So yeah, and if you want to view any of the other videos we've done similar to this on our website, mmguardian.com, if you scroll down on the homepage to the Parent Info Center, you'll find a bunch of other videos we've done, along with sample contracts you can do with your child where you outline rules, and those can be very effective for setting guidelines and making your child feel like they can come talk to you about these things if they happen. And Scott, where can people find you?
Oh, if you go to my website, internetsafetyconcepts.com, I have under my families tab, there's a whole bunch of resources for you when it comes to being safe on the internet, also with internet guides and also with contracts there. But I also have a link to my books. I also have a link to any consulting or presentations that I can come into your community and do. But website is internetsafetyconcepts.com.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Thank you, Facebook user, for tuning in and joining the conversation. All right. So yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic day.
Bye. Be safe. Thank you.